Coogs house. The Houston Cougars escaped over the weekend, but I think they found something worth holding on to.
You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs Daily Podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Andrew. Whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Appreciate making sure to listen each and every day here at Locked On Cougs. And we'll join the conversation. If you don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below. What was the hit in your Super Bowl spread? Honestly, as weird as it is to say, I think ours is frozen pizza. That went over really well. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, but more on that fun later. We got a little quick, brief synopsis of the weekend that was the Houston Cougars this weekend. Houston beats Colorado 69-59 in a nice win for the Cougs. Wasn't necessarily as I don't know, explosive, as dramatic, as big a win as you might have hoped for when you look at these teams on paper before the game. But I think the biggest thing that stuck out to me in watching this one back after the fact, I didn't get to watch it live. Got to go to watch the Rockets play in enemy territory, so had to watch this one a little bit later, and actually watch it in two different parts because of that. But Houston was very clearly running on fumes. I want to talk about that some, but I do think they unlocked something in that second half, really, that I think they can get to a little bit more and use a little bit more often. Now, Houston's running on fumes, and it's no secret that this 20-game Big 12 gauntlet only got tougher. You're seeing it across the conference. It's Texas Tech comes in to beat Houston by 1, but they're also like 4 games back in the standings. I mean, like, it's just impacting everyone across the conference. Colorado, Houston just played, and you saw was a pretty decent basketball team is struggling to just tread water even in this conference. We'll talk about Baylor in a later episode. They're struggling in this with the big 20-game schedule as well. When Houston started the game and looked fresh, they jumped out to a 14-3 lead, right? That's without Manuel Sharp. That's with guys like Javier Francis playing a little hobbled. That's like with Jawan Roberts playing a little hobbled, with LJ Cryer playing a little hobbled that we didn't even know he was hobbled about till later. Sidebar, it looks like he hurt that pinky in Utah, they're saying, and it just needs to come up. For what it's worth, he didn't shoot the ball particularly well in Kansas or Utah, which if you hurt your right pinky makes some sense. He shot the ball pretty well since, but then may have like re-dinged it at the end of this game on what was already a weird play where they didn't look at a shot clock. Anyway, whole weird thing there, but he's playing Monday night. In this one, though, Houston opens up to a 14-3 lead, and then the Ruffin kid from Colorado hits a three from like the logo, like mid-court area, like into shot clock kind of situation, if I remember right. And there was actually a foul underneath the shot count. Anyway, that clearly sparks Colorado, and like Houston's like, oh, we built up to this big lead, and we're kind of hoping to coast for a second. And Colorado's like kind of amping up their gear there. And I don't mean to say that is an excuse to play down to a level of competition. Houston's a lot more talented than Colorado, as good as Colorado is. I think Colorado's better than their record, but I think Houston's also just better, right? I think that's kind of what we saw play out some. But stuff like so the basket tied it up there shortly thereafter. So Colorado hits that bucket to make 14-6, and like 2 or 3 possessions later, it's already like Colorado scoring to tie it up. That was a back cut made off of a double team in the monster trap in the post. That's just a simple backside rotation, just a half step slow. And those kinds of things add up to 2 points here, 2 points there, 2 points, 2 points, 2 points. And Houston kind of relies on making those plays because it allows for them to be over aggressive in those other moments, right? And you saw Colorado take advantage time and time again of like Houston just flat being a little bit slower to the punch, so to speak, in those kind of instances. Now, with all of that said, Houston came out and won by 10, right? With Cryer not finishing the game, with Francis in foul trouble, with Emmanuel Sharp not suiting up. Yeah, all those things aside, Houston still did end up winning the game. But I do think that what you're going to see in these tired, exhausted Big 12 teams over the course of the season is like series of punches. We talk about basketball as being a game of runs, but the runs and I think this kind of Big 12 thing are going to be like pretty dramatic. Like Crier opened up early with like big points in the first 12 minutes. I want to say it was like 10 points early. Like those kinds of one man shows. It's like, okay, get on my back. I got you for a second. You're going to see that more and more in Big 12 play because it looks to me in this game that Houston was, with the exception of like Malik, uh, maybe you could say Jawan, but truthfully, Jawan, like I don't know, Juan was like the kind of guy that he's never been 100%. So it's hard to say when he like is playing like he's 100%, if that makes any sense. I feel like outside of Malik, I think all of Houston looked about a half step slow against Colorado, um, and it you could talk about that being altitude and playing in Boulder or whatever, playing on the road as well. I guess that all would make sense, but I really think the difference here is, I mean, look at Houston's schedule. They haven't had a whole lot of days off as of late. I mean, you look at, so they played the 11th at Kansas State. They got to fly home late that night. Then they host West Virginia on a Wednesday. That Saturday, they're at Central Florida. That was an 11 a.m. game, right? So that means you got to get there like early the day before to have some shoot around kind of stuff and settle in because you got to get there for like a breakfast tip off. I guess it's 11 local time. It was noon East Coast, but either way, that's a Saturday. Then that next Wednesday, you're at Utah. That game was supposed to be a Tuesday, but it got bumped. So you do all your practice and preparation to play Tuesday, and the weather bumps it to Wednesday, takes away your off day because then you leave that Utah game and have to go play at Kansas Saturday, 2 days later. That game goes in double overtime. Then you have to come home late. You get like kind of a little bit of rest. You got to go play. You got to play at West Virginia and do that travel as well. Host Tech Saturday. I mean, these are Saturday, Wednesday. Then you go from hosting Tech Saturday to hosting Oklahoma State, and what was also an ugly game Tuesday. I guess you kind of got a little bit of a break between Oklahoma State and now, and then you went Tuesday to Saturday instead of Wednesday to Saturday. But you also had to travel to Colorado for a relatively early in the day game on Saturday as well. So this constant travel back and forth is it's a lot, especially when you factor in like with the 20 game Big 12 schedule, you're not getting any weeks where you have just one game, let alone any kind of a bye week in any kind of function, right? Like this is a like already a gauntlet just on a talent thing. And I think it's showing its face in Houston's play. The way Houston plays defense requires playing at a very high speed every single second. They don't full court press a whole lot or anything like that. That's not the intensity. The intensity is a physicality, a everything inside of 35 feet is covered up. We're double teaming a bunch of different spots on the floor. We're double teaming a bunch of different players you've got based on wherever they are, like a bunch of different schematic things that are kind of working and grinding them out. And when you factor that in, plus the level of practice you're going to have to be able to play that way and be prepared to play that way against opponents, I mean, the horror stories that you hear about practices like that at Houston are kind of crazy. I don't have any idea what the day after Texas Tech would have been like. And frankly, some of the more dramatic horror stories you hear about are more in the film room than on the floor, actually. But um, Houston's guys are worked and they need breaks. And you hear Sampson talking about it. You hear other Big 12 coaches talk about it as well. This is not just a Houston problem. And so I think that's why you see games like this Colorado game that could be a 15, 20 point Houston win turn into a 10-point win because, they're managing that a little bit better, maybe, or different, maybe, or certainly healthier. They're also at home. And it really worked against Houston. I do think they found something worth unlocking here in this game, though. And so I want to talk about that in a second. Before we get to what Houston unlocked against Colorado, I do want to remind you that today's show is brought to you by FanDuel because when the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip or bet on the fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can combine your live bets into a same game parlay. I like using the FanDuel live betting feature because it keeps me up to every moment unexciting game. I can kind of make up for stuff I might have missed at the very start. Whether I'm backing my team, like the Rockets of the weekend, didn't go our way, or a late game rally, picking a player to hit a clutch three or whatever, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use. When you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, FanDuel customers get $150 back in bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 back in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports partner of the NBA. Park Ranger Locked on Coogs here, trying to recap some about Houston's 69-59 win over Colorado in Boulder. And Houston in this one did a lot of things kind of sloppy and a lot of things not so great. I think a lot of people are just trying to flush this one, get to Monday night against Baylor, right? And kind of hopefully get into a little bit of a break after that before Arizona next weekend. I mean, the Big 12 does not slow down. But I do think Houston did one thing in this game, and it's something that kind of like adjusted that they've been doing a lot. But I think they can kind of get back to it over and over again. So Houston's done a really good job this year of playing through the post, right? When we spent the first part of the year searching for who that like go to, get on my back, get on my backpack kind of guy was going to be. I think it's turned into Jawan Roberts. I don't think there's any question about that, right? What was interesting to me was they played the post a lot in this game, as they've been trending towards doing, but they also put Terrance Arceneaux in it. Now, Terrance had a really good game. He got to start with Emmanuel Sharp hurt. He's gotten that start a couple times now. He was the sixth man prior to that. That makes total sense. Similar position, right, etc. And he had the opening bucket, right, a little baseline drive. It's not like he was something that only found him in the second half, anything like that, right? He has like a jab step three from behind the arc at one point in the it might have been the first possession of the second half. He has all that kind of stuff too, and that's all in his bag and that's all in his game. It's one of the reasons I think he's a pro. He's got a lot of different ways he can score. I think one way he really helped Houston though is not unlike Jawan Roberts when they put him in like a 15-foot, 16-foot, maybe even 12-foot post area, right? Or he's that, mid-range from the basket. He catches the ball sealed with his back to the basket, and he just got a lot of different options he can use. A lot of things he can pull out of his bag from that area. Now, maybe this is me giving too much credit to high school basketball because he was a forward at the high school level. But what you see with him, his back to the basket is he's just a better athlete, generally speaking, than anyone guarding him in that region. You're going to put a traditional forward on him. He can go by that face up and go by that guy really quickly, get a shoulder square to the rim and finish it around the rim. If you put a littler guy on him to keep up on the speed wise, he's long, he's tough, he knows what he's doing with the back to the basket post moves, can finish over the top of things, right? Now, it's not that he had like 1,000 points. He finished with 15 in this one, right? I thought they're just a really timely 15, and I think that's something like a well they got to go back to, right? I think it's because, frankly, when he's in the game as the three, he kind of demands a very different athlete on him than Emmanuel. I mean, Emmanuel's not really going to be able to do that kind of stuff when he's the three or Malik or whomever, right? I also thought it was interesting that there was a moment in the second half when Jawan Roberts gets hit in the face and he subs out because they stop play or whatever. He gets hit in the face, subs out. And they go to Terrance after that as the four. We've seen small ball with Terrance the four before, but they put him outside the perimeter and do a lot of four guard, pick and roll kind of stuff. But putting him in this like post situation with his back to the basket really opened up a lot. Frankly, it gave Houston a way to run those kinds of things they run for Jawan without having one on the floor, right? And that was really important, I thought, in this one. Part of the thing that Jawan does is he's really good at passing the ball. Arceneaux's good at that too, and maybe at the same level, but Juan is like, one of the best guys ever to come through Houston, right? And I think that's part of his growth areas. He's going to continue to get better at that. That's Arceneaux is, I guess. I think the other thing about this is like, so JoJo Tugler is not an isolation kind of scorer consistently yet. He's got games where he has a little hook shot because he finishes so high, but I'm not sure I'm going to like go to that well a bunch of times until I've seen it fall a few more, right? He does a really great job of finishing. He finishes high, finishes wide, finishes all kinds of stuff. And frankly, I've seen him hit a couple of threes in his career now, so maybe he's going to expand that out. Javier Francis, the other post player Houston's got, right, is good at post moves, but I wouldn't want him starting them at 15 feet away from the basket. He's a true center as far as like his distance from the hoop in that kind of sense. Said Loss, not that kind of guy. It's really just been Roberts. Arceneaux opens up a second, right? And I think that, again, it requires the right kind of matchup, right? Because you can't have it won't necessarily work against every single forward in the Big 12 or in college basketball. But it really did open up a lot of things that Houston was trying to do. And frankly, it gave Houston some consistency, I thought, when Juan went out of the game. And it was short lived. It wasn't it wasn't the entire second half. It wasn't like every possession they fed Arsenal in the post or anything like that. But he's such a unique and different athlete. And you can use him in so many ways. You almost forget about ways that he can be used, right? You use him so much in the perimeter because he's a big perimeter guy, a long perimeter guy with a great first step. But you kind of forget, like, oh, he can also do the back to the basket stuff. And him getting to show that off, I think, was a really big deal. Now, I don't think it's, again, like an every possession kind of thing or an every lineup kind of thing. And I don't think I'd ever go to in a closing situation over a Juwan post up, right? I still think that's the way you close the game. I still think he's the closer for this team and all of that. Especially with like a more traditional center like Tugler or Francis or even Lott underneath the basket, right? So you can catch like high-low passes out of you get Robert turning around there and that kind of stuff. But I do think it gives you other options there, and I'm also intrigued to see what it looks like more with both Roberts and Arsenault at that like post spot where they can both like play high-low, both play at 15 feet, really get some alternating kind of things going. And can they really dig into that and get more out of that in this game? Now, that's my biggest takeaway. I think that I'm not seeing a whole lot of other people dive into, and I think there's some gold there to be found. And that doesn't mean that like there aren't other ways to score in this game. Houston only had 5 players score. Roberts had his 20. You had Uzan had his 12. Cryer had 15. A lot of that in the first half. Arsenal also had 15, a lot of his in the second half. And then Malik Wilson had 7. That's it for the points. And they played 9 players in this one, which I think, really speaks to, again, that exhaustion we opened up the show talking about. And so the more ways you can find to manufacture points, the better. Now, Monday night, one of the ways they're going to manufacture points is by bringing Emmanuel Sharp back. That dude's a scorer with a week off of the ankle. I think he'll be okay. So we'll see what he looks like against Baylor. I'm going to go preview that one over on a second episode. It should be live any second now for you as well. We'll be also live post game after the Baylor game is over. Remember, this Baylor game is at 8 o'clock local time, 8 p.m. local time. The game that is in Waco at the end of the season has been scheduled for 9 o'clock local time, 9 o'clock p.m. Central Time. Do not get the two confused. Go watch Baylor at 8 and then tune back into Locked On Coogs live post game for a full breakdown and rundown of what all is going on in that one. Locked On Coogs, primarily Locked On Podcast Network. There's your team every day. Go Coogs.